look at Rav Blau's Pischei Choshen to really get a better introduction to this particular area of damage, where a person has an obligation to distance sources of damage that are on his property from traveling to his neighbor's property and causing damage. So we talked about smoke, we talked about noise, we talked about vibrations. So the Sefer had referred us to look at Rav Bloy's work. Let's just see here. How do we expand this? I'm going to try and share my screen. Hold on. Here we go. And the only thing I need to do is figure out how to, here, oh, here we are. Here we are. Okay. So he says, Omnam kepeticha lehilchot shchenim, matzati lenachon lahatik midivrei harosh b'tshuva. He says, by way of introduction to the laws of neighbor behavior, I want to show you a tshuva from the Rush, who starts off with the words, Ki deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom, that the ways of the Torah are pleasant and all of its pathways are peace. Where is this pasuk? Does anyone know? It's in Mishlei. It's in Mishlei. V'hikpida Torah shelo yasa adam b'toch shelo davar hagorim hezek lechavero. And the Torah is careful to exhort us to that we're not allowed to do something even on our own property that's going to cause damage to our fellow. Umidivrei haRamban v'harashba b'Bava Basra b'Hahida Rav Yosef nira shafilu b'davar she'eno girei delay roi lechasid laharchik lifnim mishuras adin shelo yasik lechavero ayin sham. He says that from the Rishonim, it's clear that even if it's not direct damage, it's only indirect causation, you still, a pious person will never allow himself to be the source of discomfort or any other thing to his neighbor. Uvechazonish kasav sheikrei dinei shchenim nimsru lechachamim likvora manikra osa b'toch shelo. The Chazon Ish writes that these laws were given over to the Chachamim, I guess, of every generation to establish what is considered to be doing something on your own property that is confined to your property versus that which is not confined to your property. V'acharei hachra'atam havi din Torah, and based on what they estimate is fair use of your property, that's how the halacha goes. Umisvara nira shegam bazeh yesh linhog al pi haklal mada alach sani lechavrach lo savid. But he says, but logic dictates that anything you wouldn't want to be done to you, don't do to your fellow. Which means even if you can get off with a technicality, don't do anything that you feel your neighbor would not want, that you would not want done to yourself. Don't do to your neighbor. Mm-hmm. The golden rule. And that's how you avoid a lot of conflict with your neighbors. Now, and then he says that we'll see later laws of damages even to non-Jews. V'davar hashachiach v'yesh makom ladun bazeh v'chol nizke v'tashmishe shchenin. Something that's quite prevalent in these halachos. Shemin hadin enu yachol ha'akev al chavero afal pi sheyesh lo ktsas nezek o chashash nezek. There are situations where I cannot prevent my neighbor from engaging in a certain activity, even though it creates a slight nuisance. V'yachol la'akev alav al yedei hashilton al pi hachok, im muter lo lifnos li'iriya o l'shilton la'akev alav. There are situations where halacha would not be on my side, let's say, if my neighbor's creating a minor nuisance, the halacha would not allow me to prevent him from doing that, but the municipality would. So is it permitted for me to reach out to the municipality to complain in those situations? V'lichora efshar lahavi raya medivrei harosh b'tshuva shemhirchik binyano al pi to'us hadayin mitzvah lahagid lo she'ino tzarech mipnei hashavas aveda. That if a person distances whatever construction or whatever project he's doing because of a mistake that a judge makes, even in Beis Din, the Rosh writes in a tshuva that it is a mitzvah to inform the person that he's not obligated to go to the expense of distancing that source of damage or his construction, as there's a mitzvah to notify him that a mistake was made, and he should try to get a reversal of the judgment. Meaning that the Rosh says that if I know the law and I know that the judge made an error, I have a mitzvah to notify my friend, you were mistreated in court, you should go back and appeal. Now, and why is that? That's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to try and repair or restore someone's loss. So, umashma, what we can infer from that, shekol she'eno chayav lasos al pi hadin, imonea mimenu zuchuto o mechayvo lasot shelo kedin, yesh bo mishum hashavas aveda. So based on this, we can infer that any time that I'm not obligated to do something according to halacha, or if my neighbor tries to coerce me to do it based on things that are outside of halacha, there's a mitzvah of hashavas aveda to stop that from happening. The kol shekain she'asa limnoa mimenu al pi hashilton. And therefore, logic would dictate that it would certainly be usher for me to go to the authorities to prevent someone from doing something that the halacha does not prevent him from doing. That would be one side of the argument. Okay, what about Dina de Malchusa? Uleidach gisa. So he says, well, let's go to the other side. The other side is Efshela hochiach midivrei hamarik shorish kuf tzari aleph be'inyan cheskas yishuv. There is something called cheskas yishuv. What does that term mean? It means that there is a right of status quo, okay, in every community. Sha'af al pi sheinu yachol la'akev alav al pi beis din milavu ladur b'makomo im yachol la'akev alav al yedei hasar harishus biyado. This is something the Maharik says. If I can't coerce a person or prevent a person from living in my vicinity, but the law, the municipal zoning would prevent that person, then I have a right to go to the municipality. Ve'hiviu habeis Yosef b'siman kufnun vav mechudash beis, aval be'bedek habayis sham tamala v'zel l'shona. But so the Beis Yosef actually cites him, but the Bedek Habayit, which is another Rishon, questions why this is permitted. Udvarav temuhim be'enai heich yufkar zeli hiskaber alav al yedei hasar b'shelo al pi beis din. What right do you have to use the secular authorities and go outside of the Beis Din's jurisdiction when you're a from Jew? The afal pi shehifriz harav al midosav lihit lahatris neged hacholik alav lo bishvil zeh emna milichtov hanira li demelecha shemaymu ve'ein masopanim badover adkan. And even though the Ma'arik seems to be very strong in granting this permission to go to the municipal authorities, but I'm going to stand my ground. Basically, I'm not going to back down. וגם בשו"ת מביט הרich לדחות דברי המעריק וראיותיו וחולק עליו, דכל שזה יכול לעשות על פי בייס דין, הרי הוא כמי שזכה בדבר ואינו יכול להוציא זכותו ממנו על ידי השר עין שם. That if a person has a halachic right to do something, you cannot take away his halachic right, says the Mabit, to do it using the secular authorities. Okay. So this is something that we were struggling with the last few days.
Mhm.
When can you invoke the municipal authorities when they come down harder on your neighbor than the halacha would? And so you see this big machlokes. The Maharik says you can because this invoking this term chezkas hayishuv. When you move into a community, there are certain bylaws that everyone is expected to abide by. And if a person's not willing to abide by those bylaws, let's say, the bylaws say that your front door has to be painted this uniform color, and he wants to paint it psychedelic colors, and it disturbs you, right? It just, it grates on you every time you walk past this guy's door. You say to yourself, uh, and I wish So, not that it should bother you, but some of the things bother people. And the homeowners association wouldn't stand for it. So, but they don't know about it. So do you have a right to complain or not? So you have this machlokas. On the one hand, if you took this to Basin, the Basin would say, what difference does it make what color his front door is? There's no such halacha that you can prevent someone from painting his door a certain color. Um, but the municipal bylaw prevents it. So this is the machlokas. So he says, "Ubishailos teshuvas Rashdam simin taf zayin hevi divrei hamarik because of the afal pish lachar nira dover tamua ma'od." The Mahar Shadam says that even though the Maharik at first glance seems to be very troubling, his permission granting to go to the municipal authorities over contra the halacha, mikol makom mi avo achar hamelech et asher kavar asuhu. But he says, listen, if he paskin that way, I'm not going to challenge him. V'nir midvar of Shamdari shemagia liyoshvei ha'ir k'tzat nezek b'masha ze yavo sham. It seems like the Maharik permits this because the guy that they want to prevent from moving into the area presents a minor nuisance. Okay, so maybe he wants to set up some kind of operation in his apartment and they find out about it. It presents a minor inconvenience, not a major inconvenience. Okay, so halacha would be on his side that he can do that, but the neighbors are mildly put out by it, and therefore they can stop him. It's only when there is real damage or there is a real nuisance created. In other words, from some of the poskim, they say the reason why the Maharik is defendable in his position is because there is some level of nuisance or inconvenience. It's not just enough for a person to say, this bothers me. Or let's say he's a social justice crusader. There's one angry woman in every crowd, and so she says, you're not allowed to do this, and I'm in charge, right? So, you've seen that, you've seen that kind of person. But what difference does it make to you? That's not the point. The point is that it goes against the zoning, goes against does it bother you? That's not the point, right? And so that kind of thing, even the Maharik would be against, is what these poskim are arguing. There has to be a reason why that this is creating a nuisance. And it's not just enough that it goes against whatever asinine law that may be in the books. The Rama ends up siding with the Maharik. That many of the Achronim are critical of the Rama, who cites the Maharik granting permission to go to the municipal authorities to prevent this guy. because we see so many people are critical of the Maharik. The Gam Bekesef HaKodshim Shom Kosov Kain. Because of Lahasbir Svaros HaMaharik V'Habes Yosef. V'Habes Yosef Sfira Leishaf B'Mokom Damrin and Ovid Inish Dina L'Navshe Ein Lasos Al Yedei Goyim. And the argument is against the Maharik and against the Ramah, that even though you're allowed to many times take the law into your own hands, but you shouldn't do so by using a non-Jewish authority. V'chmoshe kosav haRamah b'simin Dalet Sif Aleph. Ve'ilu Maharik Sfir Leisha Kishi Efshir Lasos Ba'ofen Acher Mutter Gam Al Yedei Goyim. And the Maharik opines that you can, if there's no other way for you to prevent the guy from moving in, then you're allowed to invoke the secular authorities. V'od chasav de'efshir demaro marchado mar marchado v'lo pligi Beis Yosef ari kishuhu kvar bekarga demasa v'hamarik ari kisheinu bekarga. It could also be that there's a difference between someone who's already living and under the rule of the and already as a citizen of that place, where you don't have a right to displace him, versus when a person is not yet a citizen, and that's what the Ma'arik is talking about, where you want to prevent him from coming in. That's another possibility. V'od chasav de'efshir shemuter limnoa revach mechaverim al yedei kach yimna mimenu revach yoter gadol. And he also writes that you could prevent someone from profiting by moving into your neighborhood if it'll cause you to lose an even greater amount of benefit. The sim shef shishigam beis Yosef model is because of shedavar zeh tzarich in gadol ve'en adam roa chova la'atzmo v'roi sheyavchinu al yedei mi she'eino nogeya, that when it comes to these halachos, every person is somewhat prejudiced in their own favor, and therefore you should go to a third objective party to seek out counsel. Umidvarav nira shemashved din mini al yedei hasar limini al yedei arkos v'lechora nira shebe'arkos chamer yoser v'aser afilu be'efsed v'tzarachiyim. It seems that there's an equation between using the secular authorities, the zoning code authorities, to prevent someone from doing something is tantamount to suing them in the secular court, but it's not so clear. Okay. Well, anias daiti. Yeah, yeah.
We've hinted around like a condo corporation and rules for the condo, as opposed to the secular authorities and bylaws. Does that make any difference? Like,
it doesn't seem to make any difference. It doesn't
even
seem.
If everyone in the building and they're all Jews agreed that this is the rules we're going to have for living here, we're saying you can't go to them if it's not lining up with what.
If it doesn't align with halacha, exactly. So, but it's a machlokes. Right. In other words, there's two sides to this, and where we're at in this discussion is maybe the best thing is before you take the law into your own hands, you go to a third objective party to consult with them and say, right, am I being overly pedantic, right, and mean, yeah, or is this is this something that's appropriate for me to do?
Well, the first thing to do is speak to the guy and see whether you can come up with some resolution potentially.
Not necessarily. There may be situations where the guy is not speakable to.
Oh,
here that the case is you want to prevent this person from coming into the building. He hasn't.
No.
Yeah. Ulanias daiti nira mitoch divrei hamarik shelo hitcheli no yedei asar ela b'nidon didei uchemoshe kosav b'zeh halasha. The Maharik seems to only be permitting using the secular authorities in the case that is unique that he addresses. Kishem shu rotz alavo ba'al korchan shel yoshvei al yedei asar ken ya'akvu gamem al yado al yedei asar shelo yavo v'yishar kolcham ad kan. In other words, this guy is coming into the neighborhood, and based on what is he coming into the neighborhood? The rights that are granted to him by the municipality, that anyone can live anywhere. Okay, but let's say they could also use those same secular authorities to prevent him from coming in. I'll give you something like what happens, we had this Shaila before in the Baruch Omer, where a completely 100% from condominium building. And this guy is coming in, and he's not religious. And we know he's going to be doing stuff. He's going to be Machal Shabbos, and he's going to be watching his TV and making parties on Yom Kippur and stuff like that.
Mm.
Can we use whatever devices that we can think of using municipal law? Let's say we come up with some technicality to prevent him from coming in. So he's coming in based on the fact that you're not allowed to discriminate based on religion, based on race and things like that. So maybe we can prevent him based on the fact that maybe he's we're able to pin something on him based on a technicality to prevent him from coming in. So in other words, you're fighting fire with fire. So in that situation, it's much easier to sanction what the Maharik is arguing for. And therefore, it makes perfectly good sense why you could use a secular authority to prevent it. אפשר שמודה שאסור למנוע ממנו באיזה צד שהוא דבר המותר לו לעשות על פי דין Torah. But let's say he's not moving in or trying to move in based upon secular law, but simply based upon the fact that it's a free market and there's no halachic reason to prevent him from moving in, she'ein adam oseh bama la'atzmo, that you're not allowed to create your own altar, which is a phrase that you're not allowed to take the law into your own hands. And just because this guy has the ability to prevent him, what right do you have to use your own discretion to stop something from doing something that he's halachically entitled to do? The kol sheken kishein lo nezek klal shebevadei osum nomena. That certainly would be the case if it doesn't create a disturbance for you at all. Ba'adarabba matzinu kama ofanim shamu shekofen al midas tom kishezen nehene v'zelo chaser. And we find many cases where we say that there's something called midas dom. What does midas dom mean? You can't inconvenience another person if there's no benefit to you through that inconvenience. In other words, midas dom is where zen nehene v'zelo chaser. The other party benefits and I don't lose anything. I can't prevent someone from taking action if his actions in no way affect me or cause me any detraction to my life. V'ra'isi b'shut avnei nezer siman lamed vav b'din mi sheyesh lo beis hakneses v'ratza echad livnos od beis hakneses. So he says there's a case as follows. The Avnei Nezer brings a case where there's already a shul in the area, and a person wants to build another shul. Okay, v'halach harishon umasar l'shilton shelo yitnu lo rishayon. And so the guy who davens or the president of the pre-existing shul, goes to the authorities and complains that this guy should not get a license to build his synagogue. So v'hevri divrei hamarik v'habeis Yosef, and in his defense, he brought the words of the Maharik that says you're allowed to use the secular authorities if the guy is, let's say, violating the zoning laws. So let's say, we talked about that shtibel on Arnold, right? Let's say it didn't present a nuisance, but let's say I decided I don't want any competition. I don't want anyone going to daven at that place. So it's got nothing to do with the nuisance because I don't live anywhere near there, but I want to stop that guy from creating a competing shul. So because of the al kolpanim ein lo leilech le'erkos, avol bedavar hamasal lemimshala ein lo din erkos. So the Avnei Nezer says you can't take him to court, but you are allowed to complain to the authorities about his violation of the zoning laws, or to appeal to the authorities that he should not be granted a variance or a license. Pluktat Hamaharik v'habeis Yosef, the Maharik sover the kiven she'ino hezek elaminias revach mutter lihishtadel. The Maharik argues as follows. This guy is not actively causing me damage by opening up a shul a block away, but he's preventing me from profiting. Because if some members from my shul leave, I'm not going to get the membership money that they would normally pay because they'll quit the shul.
The truth.
Now, that may be true, but it's not damage. It's not damage. That's not damage. That's just withdrawing or preventing me from profiting. And there's a difference in halacha between those two.
Actually, Rabbi, we had a situation many years ago, very here, where Westmount Shul and Nation Torah were together as one. And then they split off. It was quite a situation. But anyways, when the split off happened, it was challenging.
Yeah.
Because now you have a half a shul leaving.
Yes.
With membership fees and
yes.
like that.
Right.
So that would be a case where it really is concerning and financially damaging, and I could be a concern of the vitality of the shul to keep going.
Correct. It could, but it's a prevention of what that other party is doing is what we would call fair competition. You can't stop someone from opening up another religious institution.
Or two butchers on the same street. You're not gonna stop someone.
In most cases, you can't stop another butcher from opening up. Correct. But there, that's purely a business venture. There are times when you could. If you can demonstrate that the community cannot support two butchers, then sometimes the Beis Din will put an end to it, although it's the burden of proof is quite high in that situation. But when it comes to religious institutions, where it's just a question of, this new shul is going to take my members and I'm not going to be making as much money. So you can't stop them from doing you can't stop them from doing that. So that's the argument of those who argue with the Maharik. But the Maharik is of the opinion that you could use the authorities even in that situation. Ve'ela b'nidon didan didei dekeven shu davar shetzarach rishayon v'hu michok hamalchus v'zeh mamna mimenu shelo yasig rishayon enu ela minias revach ayin sham. So the Avnei Nezer wants to argue that, he says, by invoking the authorities, I'm not damaging the guy who wants to open the second shul either. I'm just preventing him from being able to do what he wants to benefit. I'm preventing benefit to him. I'm not actually causing him damage through the secular authorities. It could be that the Avnei Nezer was only prepared to permit that because the guy had already contacted the authorities. And then he was asked, can the guy be castigated in the community? And he didn't want to get involved. So we will just have a few more paragraphs, so we'll finish this in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. But you can see that it's quite intricate and it's not so smooth. It's not so smooth to be able to say one way or the other. So we'll have to hold it here for today, and we'll continue. We'll just finish it off to